Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and a huge welcome to Produce, Mix, Fix, and Conquer. So my name is Rich Steve Beck. I'm the founder of our community. So feel free to join us on facebook.com/groups/produce, mix, fix, and conquer. And also you can join us on YouTube, which is youtube.com/produce, mix, fix, and conquer. So we've got a fantastic guest coming up next, which is Mr. Shaun Drew. Now, Shaun has worked on some epic films and also TV as well. So he's composer for DC Entertainment and Warner Brothers' billion-dollar franchise, DC Superhero Girls. He's also an amazing string writer and scored music for The Vault, starring Hollywood A-lister James Franco, as well as working on various projects over the years. Shaun has produced and composed over 600 minutes of original music. So without further ado, Mr. Shaun Drew. How you doing, Shaun?
Hey, Rich. Great to be with you today. How are you?
Yeah, really good. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's fantastic to have you here.
Great to be here.
Fantastic. How's things out in LA at the moment?
It's been a bit warm, but we can't complain. The fires aren't too bad yet, and hopefully they won't get to as bad as you're thinking. But we're doing okay. Can't complain.
Absolutely. How have things been during lockdown for you over the past year or so?
Well, it's been interesting. 2020, I was planning on forming a house recording band. It was actually going to be a strings ensemble because I have a lot of experience working with live strings. So I wanted to package the strings ensemble with my services as a composer to shop around to the studios. And then COVID hit. And so in the meantime, I had made all these investments in equipment to record the ensemble and modifications to my space. And suddenly COVID hit and had to find another option. So I'm not sure when I'll circle back to the live house band idea. And at the moment, I guess when there's a need, you can always find what you're looking for. And lo and behold, on social media, I came across an orchestra that's based where you are in Manchester called Northern Film Orchestra. So I have been collaborating with them starting last year. And I'm really pleased with the results. So they're a remote recording service that's located in Manchester. They work at a beautiful newly built hall and have access to a lot of musicians at the school that's affiliated with the hall. So it's been a great collaboration. I'm looking forward to more.
Brilliant. Fantastic. I can't wait to hear your work. It's going to be awesome, Shaun. That sounds brilliant. Fab. So thanks, Shaun. So with our previous guests, so what we've done over the last few months is explore about your background and your journey of where you were to where you are now. So it'd be great just to start off with, like we have with our previous guests. So what music did you listen to growing up? So what music did your parents play to you at home as a kid?
Sure. I would say I always gravitated towards soundtrack music and sort of a little bit more on the classical side of music. It wasn't that my parents were playing it so much, but it was sort of what I had around me. My record collection consisted of Fantasia and E.T. by John Williams. Of course, Jaws struck all of us when we saw it. So John Williams was a big factor in my early years for sure. And I think as a consequence of just listening to those records over and over, those are the ones that I really particularly remember from my early years. But I would walk around humming the tunes and humming my own tunes. And so it stood out as a little bit maybe odd to my parents. But that's sort of where it began.
Amazing. That's fantastic. So what was the first record that you bought as a kid?
Hard to really remember a first record that I bought. I rember Thriller coming out, the video, and I remember buying Thriller. I remember buying some Elton John. Still Standing, I'm Still Standing, Rocket Man, all those great tracks, buying them as singles, and all the good stuff we grew up listening to in the 80s. Was listening to the radio a lot. Huge Peter Gabriel fan, David Bowie fan. So, remain so to this day, of course.
Yeah.
Can't really get much better for songwriting and production.
Fantastic. Absolutely. Classics. Absolute classics. Amazing. So how old were you when you first wrote your first composition? So was that quite early on, or did you learn a couple of instruments before you started composing?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I started off into rock and pop, was huge Def Leppard fan in grade school. When middle school came around, I started taking an interest in drums and got into jazz band and sort of jamming with friends and playing some Smashing Pumpkins and things like that. And I really wanted to pursue drums, and that was a bit of a debate in the household. The parents did not want a drum set in their house, but I was very persistent about that for many months, and eventually they gave in, and I started hosting band rehearsal every weekend. And I'm really thankful that my parents eventually succumbed to my wishes in that regard, because
Brilliant.
It's really where I started to form skills, serious skills in terms of learning rhythm, counting, breaking down music, just on my own, really, just the way I would think about it and analyze it and listen to it. I got really into Philip Glass, contemporary composer Philip Glass. I had a class of music appreciation in middle school, and the teacher played us Philip Glass music and asked us to write a story to it, which was just fantastic. It really unlocked a lot of possibilities for me, just thinking about creativity, and I liked writing. I still like writing at the time, and how music converges with story and how you think of pictures in your mind based on what you're listening to.
Yeah.
So I sort of from there on out became a big Philip Glass fan, and later got into Steve Reich, another modern minimalist whose work I love. Everybody needs to know Music for 18 musicians. If you haven't heard it, it's just the most incredible piece of music, just exhilarating from start to finish, and paints a picture as well with all the textures and rhythms.
Absolutely brilliant.
So where were we? So I got into working with DAW of Cubase VST 5.0 when I was around 18 years old, quite a long time ago. That was in high school. Again, I was working with a rock band at the time, my little band, my little high school band that I was playing drums and singing for, and just started learning recording little bit by little, and along with the other bandmates, we kind of just figured things out here and there for ourselves. Of course, the internet wasn't what it is today, so the learning curve was a lot more difficult, I'd say. The information just wasn't at your fingertips.
Yep.
So, and I was in Arizona. That's where I was born and raised. Eventually moved to Los Angeles after college, and knew that I wanted to be here where the media business is, and wanted to pursue music for film. And so here I am, over 20 years later, still hanging.
Still going. Amazing. Thanks so much for that, Shaun. So tell us, how did you, so obviously you moved to LA, like you said, and so how did all your professional relationships with these TV companies and film companies begin? So tell us that story.
Sure. So one thing I'll just say generally is that as engineers and composers, we don't get out a whole lot, and as we all know, so it can be hard to put your foot out there and to network, and it's never necessarily the most fun thing that comes to mind, but it's important. And if you can be relaxed about it and look at every conversation with whomever you encounter as a possibility for a future relationship, that's how you have to look at it. You have to think long term. There's really not much of a cutting corners or a quick route to getting the next film project or a career. It just doesn't work like that, at least not with anybody that I've ever come across. So when I first moved out to Los Angeles, I attended a UCLA summer workshop in film producing and made some friends that are still great friends all these years later. And in fact, one of them has become a super talented director that I'm now working with on his first directorial debut, his first feature film. So it just goes to show that you never know when a relationship may become a working relationship. So that's one relationship story that I like to share. And by the way, I'm not the composer on that film, but I've been brought on to replace some of the source music, which is the background music, say playing on the radio in the scene or that kind of thing. So I've been brought on to produce songs that have a similar vibe, and that's been a kind of a cool exercise. And I always like to mix when I get a chance, just focus on mixing and production. So
brilliant.
It's really cool. And as it turns out, Lisa Gerard, the incredible singer and composer, is the composer of this film. And
wow, no way.
Yeah, a little bit of funny background about that is that when I first moved to Los Angeles, Lisa Gerrard was in Los Angeles working with Hans Zimmer on Gladiator.
Yeah.
I had reached out to Lisa at that time just through email, introduced myself, and I wanted to somehow help or be involved. I was just a huge fan of her Dead Can Dance and her solo stuff.
Yeah.
You know, in my college years, she caught my attention, and I just love her style and her voice. And so I reached out to her. She invited me to send a demo at the time. I sent what I had, and we didn't connect. But now we have a chance that we're working on a project, that my friend has somehow brought to fruition. I was in class with that friend at that time, and it's just sort of a full circle moment. So kind of funny.
Yeah. That's amazing. And I can't remember which, there's one track by Lisa Gerrard that I especially love. I think it was the trailer for the Superman film that she did with Hans Zimmer. I can't remember who else was on there, but that track was just phenomenal. It just, her voice, I'm sure you agree, but her voice just gives me goosebumps. It's just such a phenomenal voice, really original, and really, I don't know how to describe it, but it sounds otherworldly. The way how she sings, it's fantastic and so well suited to TV and film as well. It's incredible.
She's one of a kind and a true artist.
Very much so. Absolutely agree with you. Thanks so much for that, Shaun. So tell us about some of the projects that you've worked on as far as comic books goes. So I know that you've worked with DC Superhero Girls. You worked on that project, which has become huge. And as you said, it's become $1 billion franchise, as well as working on the 75th anniversary of the DC Comics documentary, Secret Origin, the story of DC Comics. So tell us about those two projects and how they came about.
Sure. So DC Secret Origin, the story of DC Comics, the film was produced for DC Comics 75th anniversary. Yeah. And the goal was to get it to Comic-Con in 2010 to celebrate their anniversary. So I got a call about this about 6 weeks before their deadline, and the producers were frantic because they were under the impression and hadn't been told that all the music that they had used in cutting the film, all the John Williams scores, the Danny Elfman from Batman, all this wonderful comic book film music, that it was all able to be used in their film. And then suddenly legal got back to them at the 11th hour and said, no, you can't. You can only use up to 2 minutes of each of those scores. Wow. So it was a high stress moment. And luckily for me, it was a chance to kind of save the day, which when it works out, it's a great position to be in. So that came about through a friend of mine, a very dear friend of mine, who I've known since before I moved to Los Angeles. He's from here. And he's a producer. He's had a good career, and he's not so active anymore. But he called me, thought of me, and it worked out. It worked out. I had about 5 weeks, I think. No, less than that. I had 2.5 weeks to replace 80 minutes of score. So it was pretty insane. And this was with a Power Mac G5 at the time. Yeah, so you can't render. It still can be slow going to render stems and things. So at one point I was up for 36 hours straight. Wow. Taking a 4-hour nap. And then I was up another 12 hours at the dub stage before I just completely conked out. The team was like, you got to go home and sleep. So.
Wow, that's incredible. But still, though, you managed it, though, man. It's just that you got through it and survived.
I survived. Yeah, perseverance. That's really what it is all about. To have any sort of career in this field, you have to just keep on keeping on.
Absolutely incredible. So tell us about, thanks for that, Shaun. Tell us about DC Superhero Girls, then, and that project that you worked on.
Sure. So working on the DC documentary was helpful for me career-wise because I was able to introduce myself to some others at DC Entertainment and at Warner Brothers and get some meetings as a result. And since then, I've had a good relationship with the music department at Warner Brothers, and by proxy, Warner Brothers Animation, which is sort of really just starting to hit a stride in terms of production. They're still, I'd say, in early days in terms of cranking out stuff, but doing a lot of great work there. And So I get opportunities here and there to demo for other projects, and but DC Superhero Girls was such an opportunity, and my name was put into the mix, and the producers wanted to decide just based on demos, not based on names at the time. So I won the gig, luckily, and you know, everybody demoing for these jobs is extremely talented, and it's basically, it's sort of like a lottery ticket, you know.
Yeah.
You know, or just whatever the director happens to respond to. And I'm sure many demos were great, and I happen to be the one that got that, just as there are so many others that I'm not the one that got it. So so I had a good run working for DC Superhero Girls. We did some made-for-TV specials. We did a lot of shorts that you can see on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of hours, as you mentioned, a lot of minutes of music. And animation typically is pretty wall-to-wall music, so not a lot of breaks, even though it ends up being a lot of sound effects mixing over the music. And you don't end up hearing much of the music, but it's all there telling the story in tandem with the dialogue and the sound effects. And I mean, if you want it, it's there.
That's amazing. I bet it was so much fun though as well, working on a project like that.
It is. Once you hit a stride and have a good rapport with the director, you kind of start to speak the same language with one another. And you know, at a certain point, I did the first 5 seasons of the show, and then they did a reboot with a completely different production team, different producers, and you know, animation style and everything. But the last couple of seasons, I rarely got a note of having to make a change. Like, that's how in tune I was with what was needed and what they wanted. And but as in any collaboration, the first time out is always the most difficult and the most trying. And in terms of learning the personalities, can be the most challenging as well. And that's a large part of what we do, whether it's dealing with recording artists or directors. It's a bit of another level of challenge in terms of communication when you're dealing with people who are not musicians.
Yeah.
So you have to find a way often to understand what they're trying to communicate, because they don't necessarily often have the vocabulary to describe what it is they're hearing or they think they're hearing. And they might describe it in a way that is just completely wrong technically. Like, that's not... They could tell you they're hearing a metallic sound and it's a wooden sound, and it's very hard to try to figure that out. And you don't want to insult anybody, or you just want to get at what they're trying to get at. So that can be challenging.
That's amazing. But that's quite tough sometimes, though, to be fair. Like you said, you know, if someone's got a sound in their head and, you know, you're trying to translate that sound in their head and throw lots of ideas at them to get to that point as well. I'm guessing sometimes that can be really, really hard work, and I'm guessing that can be quite a lot of going backwards and forwards with ideas as well, rather than...
It can be. It can be a bit like a dog chasing its tail at times. You're the dog.
Absolutely.
Tail.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks so much for that. Thanks, Shaun. So tell us about some of the... I noticed that you worked on adverts as well, so tell us about some of the advert projects that you've done over the years.
Sure. So those have come about mostly via third-party music libraries, where they had an option or an opportunity to pitch something I'd worked on for a trailer. Let's say, like a Pixar Brave is one that you mentioned. That was a big film. So in that case, I'm not sure, it was someone on the creative team, possibly the marketing team or what have you, but they, for this particular trailer, and they did several, the Summer Games trailer consisted of an orchestral version of We Will Rock You by Queen, which was not my work. Somebody did it, and it was great. And then they wanted, an instrumental rock, guitar and drums kind of thing to basically to morph into that from the orchestral. And it worked out really cool. I had created that track with my good friend Bernard Yin, who's an excellent local guitarist, touring guitarist, and studio guitarist, and great guy. And so we had collaborated on this, and gave it to a library that we both know of, that we work with sometimes. And so that's how we procured that.
Fantastic. That's great. Thanks so much for that. Tell us as well about scoring The Vault, starring James Franco as well. So completely different. So you've gone into the realms of film work. So tell us about the how you compose the music for the film.
Sure. So The Vault was another one that came up with a pretty tight deadline, and it was where I needed to sort of step in. They were basically pretty much out of money and pretty much out of time and needed to get this thing sold to make money back. And again, it was an opportunity where I was able to sort of step in and provide the right music for the right film. And the process was quick. It was 5 weeks. And I mean, that's from start to finishing at the dub stage.
Wow.
But luckily everybody was happy. I mean, there's a lot that can go wrong on any artistic collaboration. Sort of when you have a 5-week or shorter deadline, I guess there's only so much allowance for things to go wrong. I mean, unless it goes horribly wrong, and I guess then the producers would have to resign to starting over from scratch with another composer, and that does happen. But I'm lucky that it worked out, I'll say, and I think it turned out great. I'm happy with the work, and it suited the film.
Amazing. Tell us, what is it like as well, though? Have you gone to the movies to actually listen back in a theater to what you've composed as well? How does it feel actually hearing music that you've composed on a film? I bet it's an exhilarating feeling, right?
That's definitely the word I would use to describe it. And in fact, that film did have a small theatrical run, and my parents, who lived in Tucson, Arizona, were about 2 hours from Phoenix, an hour and a half to 2 hours away from where it was going to have a theatrical debut. And I told them, you guys really need to go up there, go see this on the big screen. For a parent, it was a happy moment for them. I know they really enjoyed that too. I'm like, stay the night in Phoenix and enjoy it, so they did. But it is exhilarating to hear it in a big theatrical setting, real loud. And also the way the music is mixed for film. Often music can really play a central role, a lot more so than in the DC Superhero Girls, which I was mentioning, is often covered up. The music can be covered up by the sound effects a lot of times. And theatrical is a completely different experience.
Absolutely great. Thanks so much for that, Shaun. So tell us as well, so when you're actually creating music, what DAW are you using when you're creating? Is there any that you particularly enjoy?
Yeah, I've been using Nuendo for quite a long time now. I mentioned earlier I started off with Cubase VST way back when, and so then it was SX3 at some point, and now the latest iteration, which is wonderful. I've got Cubase as well, and a couple versions of it on a couple of different systems here, as well as Pro Tools 2020. I certainly am finding myself using it today, actually. I'm opening up another composer session that I'm collaborating with for this project that I'm in the middle of, doing a bit of remixing on it and going to be adding some elements to it. So, yeah. So, love working cross-platform when I need to and having it all at my fingertips. Are you there?
Right, I think we're back. So I think we just had a glitch there. We're live after all. We can edit that out afterwards. That's fine. All part of the gig. Yeah, so you were saying, Shaun?
Oh, just saying I love having multiple DAWs at my fingertips and being able to manage that with different studios or different composers and being able to collaborate.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. Yeah, brilliant. I mean, I've recently actually moved on to Nuendo 11 myself as well, so I found it really, really interesting. So I was in contact with some of the guys at Steinberg just to explore. I've used Reaper, Studio One, Pro Tools still on there as well. But then really wanted to explore Nuendo, because I've noticed, and I know this is the big thing at the minute with Dolby Atmos. So have you explored Dolby Atmos? Have you looked into that as yet? Or where are you at with it all?
Yeah, I haven't had to as yet. I'm just currently set up for 5.1, so
yeah,
that's where I'm at. But I always like to be looking toward the future, so it's great. It's definitely a good feature.
Absolutely amazing. So any thoughts on Dolby Atmos? Do you feel that music will benefit from it in the future and now as well? As I know that it was recently, you might have seen the documentary on YouTube with Sylvia Massey, been interviewed by Zane Lowe. talking about spatial audio with Apple as well. So do you think that it is going to be a thing that people will be listening to all the time, or do you reckon it will be, a thing that they do from time to time, or do you reckon it's more, I don't know, more a theatrical thing, do you feel, or?
Well, I mean, it's certainly a theatrical thing, and there's a major benefit to all who visit the theater in that respect. So if it does nothing else, it's done that for us, which is great because so many people can partake and enjoy it. As far as for personal listening and such, obviously, it can, in terms of hardware requirements and things, it's just got to be accessible to people if it's going to go mainstream. So I don't know if it's there yet, probably not, but.
Absolutely. And who can get away with convincing their other half to actually maybe set up like 7 speakers in their living room? I'm guessing not many people can convince their other halves to do that. But
I'm not sure the practicality of it in general. But there are people more and more who are building their own home theaters. So I'm sure that's also a market for it, and an outlet for it.
Absolutely. Amazing. And so when you're working in, as you say, it's 5.1 that you're working in at the minute?
Correct.
Yeah. So when you're working in 5.1, so how do you approach the stereo field when you're composing? Do you think, how do you move things around and move effects around? And what's, have you got a certain methodology that you do when you're actually moving different sound effects around, or how does that usually work for film and TV?
Well, I actually am working in stereo most of the time. What I like about how my 5.1 is set up, just as a big bonus, is I'll actually switch my left and right around to my right and left surrounds, and I'll flip my chair around and listen through my ATCs here. I've got focals in the front, Trio 6Bs as my primary monitors, and then I've got the ATCs, which are a very different, a very different listening experience. And I find that as a final stage of listening, when I'm mixing or doing some mastering work, to do that is really invaluable. I'll 9 times out of 10, I'll find a couple of little things that need just a slight tweak with the ATCs. So I like that. But in terms of listening and working 5.1, I mean, there's something exciting simply about taking a stereo, even just a stereo track, and just sort of putting it up there, halfway between rear and forward, and you're in the middle of it. I like that a lot. But I really don't hear that being utilized too much theatrically or otherwise. I feel like most of the time the music is coming from left and right, and it's got a little bit of surround reverb on it, to just sort of liven it up a little bit. And so that's pretty much how things are ending up with scores in my experience. Are you with me?
I think we're back again. Apologies about the disconnection there. We are Manchester to LA at the minute as things stand, so it's a bit of a loose connection. So the audience still here. Fantastic. Thanks for waiting on us there, guys. Sorry, you were saying about your speakers. Sorry.
Oh, sure. So with 5.1, I mean, typically there might be a surround reverb placed onto a stereo track, and that kind of gives a little bit of extra space and dimension to the music. But in terms of mixing creatively in 5.1, I haven't had much opportunity for that. I think filmmakers in general are a little wary of creating what could be distracting to the audience, to have things too mobile within the surround field in terms of just the music. So I'm set up for it if needed, but it's not, I haven't yet, had a real chance to get super creative with that.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for that, Shaun. Tell us as well, so I know that you're a multi-instrumentalist. So when you're getting inspired, when you're writing music, is there any particular instrument that you pick up first?
Boy, that's hard. It's kind of like saying, how do you compose? And I can't really say it's ever one particular thing. I don't sit at the keyboard and come up with stuff. That's not really how I do it. I'll have some ideas go through my mind. I'll think of an instrument line or a rhythmic part or harmonies. Often I'll be out and about and I'll just record them on the smartphone and get back to them when I have an opportunity to. So, but yeah, I play a little bit of drums. I play a little bit of guitar. I play a little bit of bass. I have all the instruments here if and when I need them. But I pick them up as needed, basically.
Brilliant. And how many instruments do you play, just out of interest?
I mean, I'd say that handful is pretty much it. Like the band instruments, percussion, drums.
Yeah.
Drum set.
Fantastic. And I know that when we first started chatting, must have been a couple of months ago now, we were both in contact with Plugin Alliance with their new limiter. So tell us what plugins that you're currently enjoying using at the minute when you're composing and when you're mixing, and maybe what synths that you enjoy using, some soft synths maybe, and string software as well.
Sure. So I've just recently, in terms of strings, I've just recently upgraded from East West Play to their Opus engine, which is a lot more unfettered access to RAM on your computer. So I was kind of hitting a ceiling with RAM usage with their Play engine, and so I'm really glad to know that they've overcome that in their programming. So it's not an issue. So like I've got a new Mac Pro and it's got 384 gigs of RAM. I haven't yet, even in my massive template, I haven't used that much RAM, but a lot of it is dedicated to what used to be Play and is now Opus. And I don't have to split it across two machines. So I'm really happy. It's one less variable or machine that can crash when I'm working. So I've been happy working on the Mac Pro with Opus so far. So that's in terms of strings. I really decided, though, last year I needed to start working again with live strings and explore that further. So that's what I did. And as I mentioned, I've been really happy with the results. So
great.
My goal is to be relying less and less on string samples and hopefully recording more and more with live as the opportunity's there. So, but in the meantime, we have such great tools at our fingertips. It's a great time to be a composer.
Absolutely. Completely agree. I think as well, when I've talked to engineers and producers over the last few months, I think that maybe people can tell the difference between a real guitar amp, for example, and an amp sim. But as far as strings goes, the average consumer, do you think the average consumer can tell the difference between a live string quartet, for example, versus some software, or do you think it's very close, or do you think the dynamics are very slightly different? How do you feel the listener compares the two?
It's getting closer and closer all the time. And my first reaction was going to be that solo strings are much harder to replicate than a strings ensemble. But I mean, Spitfire's solo strings are phenomenal now, and others as well I know are phenomenal. And they really are closer and closer. And it's really hard to believe what they've accomplished. So your average consumer probably doesn't know the difference, even with solo strings, which is incredible. So also you asked about plugins. I also do have to give an extra shout out. I mean, I've been using UAD since forever, of course, but to me, Plugin Alliance has really kind of has really stolen the show. I mean, what they're doing is really exciting, and I think that their sort of rent to own or their subscription based model is pretty cool. It's just super cheap, and you have access to this vast growing collection of incredible plugins that are just so useful for so many different things. So, but I'll probably also be using Altiverb till the very end. That's probably my desert island plugin as a composer, would have to be Altiverb.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for that. Tell us, so obviously Dirk as well, such a lovely guy. He runs a great community on Facebook as well, and such a massive engineer fan base for that brand. Because as you said, there's so many great plugins that they do. Is there any particular EQs to you that stand out with Plugin Alliance that you use?
So for the most recent live string sessions that I did, I was using the Neve console a lot, and I think I used some of the J console, SSL J 9000J, but I think I pretty much relied on the Neve for that stuff and was really happy with it. I mean, they just work. They just sound great. It's hard to get a bad sound with any of the consoles that they're producing. So,
have you seen the new AMEC console that they've recently launched? I think it's about a few days ago now.
Yeah, I mean, it looks beautiful, and I haven't had a chance to start working with it yet, but I have installed it. It's there. I just haven't had a moment to work with it yet, but it's
amazing.
I'm sure it's going to be great.
Brilliant. Any? Do you use much? Sorry, just to get this right in my mind. Do you mix as well as compose at the same time? Did you say, and also master your own work, or how does that tend to usually work?
Sure. So often, because of the way deadlines are, as I've kind of outlined how they can be pretty tight,
Yeah.
it's best if you have your writing template kind of ready to go, like out of the box. You've got a basic mix already going with it. So it doesn't require too much mixing beyond that, if possible. So yeah, mixing as you go for sure. And then when you're working on a scene, you obviously want to make it as presentable and finished sounding as possible for a director or a producer. So yeah, you've got to do that as you go, and treat every cue as if it's the final, even if it's just a mock-up. Directors may not always have the musical vocabulary, but they do have a sense of taste, and they know when they don't like something, if it's not sounding quite right. If the strings are sounding too fake, for instance, you just don't want to have any kind of encumbrances on their responding to your work by something like that. So the better and more polished you can get your template, your out of the gate mix sounding, the better off you'll be, and hopefully the quicker you'll get to getting your music approved.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. That's brilliant, Shaun. Tell us as well, what are you using outboard wise? Is there any outboard gear that you currently use when you're mixing or composing at the moment?
Sure. So the only outboard I'm using would be my preamps. I've got the UA 6176 channel strip, which is the 610B preamp with the 1176 compressor. Those are fabulous. I've got a couple of Chandler LTD ones, which they don't make anymore, but that's Chandler's Neve clones, which are just beautiful sounding, reliable. And last year I bought a Millennium Media HV3D8 with the hopes of, and I'll get back to it, to recording live strings here. So that hasn't really seen too much use since I bought it right before the pandemic. What a great investment.
Just the way it goes, absolutely. So I think it's changing much in LA at the minute as far as the pandemic goes. Is LA opening up a bit more? Are people starting to go to concerts and going to cafes, restaurants?
Yeah, sure. On June 15th, the mask mandate was lifted. All restrictions were lifted. So other than unvaccinated people, they still, I think they're recommended to wear masks in public spaces. And then there still are individual policies from, grocery store, let's say, or what have you, or a theater. Yeah. They can have their own policies about that. And they seem to be similar to that. If you're not vaccinated, you have to wear a mask. Yeah. But it's a lot more relaxed. My wife and I actually had dinner inside a restaurant for the first time, like not on the patio, yesterday. And that was at first a bit odd because of how things have been for quite a long time now.
Yeah, sure.
But, it was great. Nobody's feeling ill so far.
Good. Thank heavens for that. Absolutely. It's crazy.
I hope it'll stay under control and people will continue to make wise decisions so that we can really completely move on from it. Yeah.
That's the fingers crossed. You've probably seen over here as well in the UK with all the soccer going on at the minute. So you probably saw there was a Wembley match with 40,000 people all together, in one place. So hopefully that means that, it's a sign that things are changing, but it's such a crazy time though, isn't it? Thanks for that though, Shaun. Tell us as well, just going back to the plugins and the outboard, do you tend to use much in the way of any compression or any saturation on your mixes?
Obviously, it depends on what I'm working. In film, anything goes. So I can be completely destroying something and pitching it way down and throwing all kinds of crushing compression and distortion and bit crushing. Anything goes. It's really. That's what's great about having so many tools available is anything you have in your mind, you can just go there. So, I use a ton of plugins, a ton. And my large scoring template is truly massive. The track count is in the thousands.
Brilliant. That's absolutely amazing. And as you said, you're on Nuendo. So I'm guessing, is it Nuendo 11 that you're using at the minute?
Yeah, I'm using Nuendo 11. I also have Nuendo 10. So sometimes I have like a studio, a long-standing studio gig that's not particularly noteworthy or musical, on a musical level, but it's sort of a corporate client kind of thing. And I have to batch out 50 MP3s at a session for this guy, and there are usually 2 sessions of 50. So it's 100 MP3s. They're pretty short, like a minute long. It's a little birthday song. And so what I've been able to do is actually run Nuendo 10 and 11 in tandem. And so I'm exporting, let's say, track 1 in Nuendo 11. Then I immediately go to to the second project where it's running the same project and export track 2. And I just bounce back and forth. They take about 10, 11 seconds each, which is just enough time for me to start the next one. So I've been able to drastically speed up my workflow in this particular kind of eccentric case of a job. So
absolutely. That's incredible. I've never heard an engineer or composer or producer do that. That's brilliant. That's just so much, so much of a time savers. I know that engineers and producers that I've talked to, like yourself, are always looking at ways to kind of, make sure that, they've got enough time to do projects, especially like you said, when you've got time restraints from all, the people that you work with. That's brilliant. That's so good. Do you use headphones as well from time to time? So I know obviously you've got your amazing speaker setup, but do you use any headphones for any critical listening, anything like that?
I'll do that usually at the end before something is really final. I'll give a listen through a couple of different headphones. I've got some Sonys that are a little bit bright. I've got Bowers & Wilkins. I have a soft spot for Bowers & Wilkins. The clarity is awesome. So I'll listen through Bowers. Those are sort of my main ones. I'm really digging the Austrian audio products these days. If you've seen their headphones that they just released, I got a couple of their OC818 mics that are just beautiful and sound great. So looking forward to using them more, hopefully for more tracking soon. Amazing. But yeah, I think their headphones are nice and detailed too. Of course, if family is around near where I'm working, headphones are useful for that. So
yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. Thanks so much for that, Shaun. Tell us as well, so I know that you've done orchestral work for a lot of YouTube shorts as well. So how do those projects tend to come about? Do people tend to contact you directly, or is that you putting yourself out there, or how does that tend to usually work?
Well, which shorts are you referring to? Just DC superheroes?
Everything. I think it's like you've said over like YouTube as well. I've looked up on your information that you've had over 150 million plays on YouTube with all that, with the shorts that you've done in the past. Is that everything combined all together with all the work that you've done, or is that just short YouTube?
That was the DC Superhero Girls franchise.
Okay.
Their main vehicle was actually shorts. So we did do the TV special, and we did a lot of video releases that are also here and again. They're on Netflix and things like that, or HBO Max.
Yeah.
The shorts, we were cranking those out. There were maybe 50 per season or something like that. Quite a number, several dozen. And so so that's where all that came from. So that was part of the same job.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for that. So that's brilliant. No, but thank you so much for your time today, Shaun. I really appreciate it. Everything we've gone through today. So before you go, tell us what's next on the agenda. So you mentioned that you're working with the orchestra in Manchester, and you're also working with your friend on the film as well. So what's next on your journey?
Correct. Thanks for asking. So right now, this film that I'm working on is called Bonded, and I'm trying to help them get to the finish line. So sort of all hands on deck with that right now. And then I'm also releasing a new strings recording actually this Friday in 2 days.
Wow.
So that'll be I think it's 10 a.m. Pacific time. So that's a composition that's sort of near and dear to me, something I'm particularly proud of, and it's come out really tremendously well with the live strings. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with everybody.
Fantastic. No, thank you so much for today, Shaun. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on as well, and just finding out. It's really interesting as well, finding out as well about compositions. It's from a very different angle, because we do talk to a lot of engineers on Produce, Mix, Fix, and Conquer about artists that they've worked with over the years. So it's really interesting to dig a bit deeper into the TV and film world as well, and composition. But yeah, so also just to say as well, thank you to everyone that's joined today. So we've got Mr. Abe that's joined, and our good friend Brian Cook I think you know Brian as well, Shaun, if that's right.
Yeah, Brian, if you're there, thanks for stopping by. Nice to see you.
Awesome. How do you know Brian?
Brian was working as an engineer at the old A&M. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. At the he was at the A&M recording studio, which was then bought by the Jim Henson Company. It's still a fabulous recording studio. He was working there at the same time when I moved to LA, and we had a mutual friend who was working as a runner / assistant there. So that's how I know Brian, and we went snowboarding together, and he's the best guy, just a most chill person, which I think working with artists is helpful to have that kind of temperament. So I haven't looked at the comments. I feel bad. I want to say hi to everybody.
That's all right. It's good. Feel free to have a look through. So Brian, we interviewed Brian a good couple of months ago, but as you said, such a lovely guy. I've had a few conversations with him afterwards as well, and his work's phenomenal. But yeah, super nice guy. And obviously, I think you might have heard the story that I'm sure he's told you that his wife works for NASA. So we're having a good chat about the Mars robot as well, and what happened on there. So that was really cool. And then we've had a couple of other users join us as well. So hey, Gordon as well, and Bops NY, just checking any other questions we've had coming through. Assume there's a lot of opportunity for. Bops NY has put a good question through on YouTube. Says, I assume there's a lot of opportunity for licensing via a library to bring in some income as well. So is that how it works with licensing? And
well, it is an opportunity. I mean, it's certainly, you can put some eggs in the basket of trying to license through a licensing house, but it has become a crowded field. They are very competitive. There are a lot of composers doing it. The licensing house, it's in their best interest to have as much music as possible. So, that's sort of a lottery ticket play. Try to get as many of your tracks into as many quality libraries as you can. Yeah, and that can be useful. A lot of them are going to be exclusive, though. So you're kind of going to lock your music up, if not permanently, then for a while. So you have to be comfortable with that. You don't want to give them something that is near and dear to your heart. You don't want to give that to a library. So that's some advice I'll give on that.
Absolutely. Instead, you want your music to be played at a theatre. At the end of the day, I'm guessing, like you said, having your parents watch a film that you've composed the music for. It's just. That's incredible, Shaun. It's just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and I'll say, I mean, a lot of the music that I really love and I'm proud of has come from these jobs, even if they've had tight deadlines. Sometimes you can do your very best work on a tight deadline because it's all instinct. You're working on instinct. You don't have time to second guess choices. You just go. So getting to that point is really exciting.
That's amazing. No, Shaun, and on that note, just thank you so much again for joining us today. I really appreciate your time, Shaun. It's been amazing having a good chat with you. So feel free to hang out for a couple of minutes after the live as well. But again, thanks everyone today for joining us. Do feel free to join the community that Shaun's on, which is ours, which is facebook.com/groups/produce, mix, fix, and conquer. And then also our YouTube page, which feel free to share that with your friends as well, which is youtube.com/produce, mix, fix, and conquer. But again, thank you very much, Mr. Shaun Drew.
Thanks, Rich. It was a real pleasure. And thank you for what you're doing for the community. I love it.
Oh, thanks so much, man. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
Take care. Thanks, guys.